like to call this annual meeting of the Virginia Society of Ornithology to order. Everyone, hello. It would be lovely to see you in person, and I will look forward to the day we can do that. But on the plus side, we probably have a lot more people who can participate doing it via Zoom. So thank you so much for joining us. So as probably all or most of you know, we lost an absolute giant this year. Dr. Byrd's contributions to and impact on the conservation world were simply beyond Herculean. Dr. Byrd was well known to us and touched the lives of many of us who are here today. Actively involved in the VSO, he served as president from 1970 to 1974. In his honor, in 2011, the VSO established the Mitchell A. Byrd Award, which recognizes outstanding scientific achievement in the field of ornithology. Brian Watts, director of the Center for Conservation Biology, wrote an absolutely beautiful tribute to Dr. Byrd, detailing his life, his career, and his conservation work. Brian was a student of Dr. Byrd's at William and Mary, and together in 1992, they co-founded the Center for Conservation Biology. In the chat, at some point, I will put a link to Brian's tribute. For those of you who haven't read it, it is well worth the read. And I'm going to just pick out a few of his words here to share. He started by saying Dr. Byrd was equally at home in the field working with birds, in the classroom lecturing to undergraduates, or in the boardroom advocating for land protection. He became one of the most trusted voices for conservation of his generation. For decades, he maintained a relentless schedule to move conservation forward, averaging 15 public presentations and 25 media stories a year. Dr. Byrd enjoyed a long academic career and was affiliated with the College of William and Mary for 70 years, chair of the biology department for 13 of those. He advised nearly 40 graduate students and thousands of undergrads, and considered the success of his students to be his greatest academic achievement. Dr. Byrd worked to establish wildlife refuges, state parks, state natural areas, wildlife management areas, and private conservation lands, and was involved in most major land protection projects for more than 50 years. His passion and drive on behalf of wildlife and wild places inspired generations of biologists who have gone on to make a difference for species throughout the world. He was appointed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to lead both the Chesapeake Bay Bald Eagle Recovery Team and the Eastern Peregrine Falcon Recovery Team. He flew the first heron survey in the Mid-Atlantic region in 1975, took over the Virginia Bald Eagle Breeding Survey in 1977, and helped conduct that survey for 40 years. He managed Virginia's peregrine reintroduction program, releasing 242 captive reared falcons between 1978 and 1993, and recovering the population to pre-DDT levels. Monitored osprey throughout the lower Chesapeake Bay for 20 years, conducted the first systemic survey for red-cockaded woodpeckers in Southside Virginia, and the first piping plover survey in coastal Virginia. Dr. Byrd, this is choking me up, and I met him a few times, but what a life. So Dr. Byrd flew his last bald eagle survey when he was 91 and gave his last lecture on the endemic birds of the Caribbean basin when he was 97. So Brian concluded by saying he lived a full life of integrity and service. He made the world a better place for birds and people. I wasn't expecting that. So I know, somebody passes, a lot of times we say he left a big hole, but really he built a mountain. So, but please do take time to read that tribute. I think you'll be really moved and impressed. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
So you've already heard a little bit from Diane. I'm going to do the treasurer's report shortly, and it'll be very brief. Then we'll have the election of our officers. We have two slates, one for officers and then another slate for the board of directors. And then Meredith Bell is going to present the awards. And then we'll have our featured speaker, Dr. Ashley Peele. So let me do the treasurer's report real quickly. This shows for all of the specific funds that we have. We have a number of restricted funds. What we had in those funds at the end of 2024 and 2025 and how it changed over the year. And overall, our total fund balances are down by over $100,000 over the year, but that was planned because we paid out the rest of our expenses for the Atlas in 2025, and that was a planned expenditure. And then we're down some in some of the other funds. General fund is also down quite a bit because we used 20-some thousand of that to support a number of conservation grants last year. And then just how much came in and how much we spent in each fund. For your information, you can see we dispersed almost 160,000 for the Atlas in 2025. So there will be a presentation of this report in the summer newsletter. So if you want to study the numbers, those will be available in the newsletter, or you can email me and ask me for them. So.
A few things about the past year. We had a very successful year, and those successes are in large part thanks to the support of all of you. As I've said before, our members are our greatest strength, and thank you all for that gift. The year's biggest news is the publication of the Atlas. It's done. And I see Jeff nodding his head, and he was right with it from the very beginning. So many of you, I won't even try to go through all the credits, but there will be tons. So as you know, it went live last fall, and it was as you know, collaboration between VSO, Department of Wildlife Resources, and Virginia Tech's Conservation Management Institute. 10 years plus in the making. So it's really, really thrilling to see it done. Other highlights this year, we awarded $20,000 in conservation grants, and they supported several DWR approved projects. So we worked in conjunction with DWR in getting those conservation funds out. The Community Outreach Committee awarded scholarships. At Bramble Hill, we installed an entirely new septic system. As you know, that was the house couldn't be used for a while. So I won't spend any more time recapping the year, but I encourage you to visit the past newsletters, which are all available on the website. And I'll sign off by saying thank you, everyone, so much. And since I mentioned newsletters, I'd like to go just back to Dixie because she has a little something she wants to share.
Yes, I became the newsletter editor as my first job when I became a board member on the VSO. And I've enjoyed doing it, but I've got other jobs and it's probably time to turn it over to somebody else. So if you read the newsletter, the last couple issues, you noticed that we had an advertisement out there for asking for a volunteer, and we got a great volunteer. I want to introduce Isabel Vanderstoop, who is a Northern Virginia new resident, moved here from Washington State, I think a couple years ago, and a relatively new birder, but I discovered her by finding a beautiful wood duck photo that she had taken, and it is now gracing the species account for wood duck. So anyway, Isabel contacted me, said she would be interested in taking over the newsletter, and we had a good meeting about it, and the executive committees decided that we would appoint her to this role. And so she will take over on July 1st, but we're kind of co-editing the summer newsletter that'll be out sometime in June. So Isabel, I think you're on. Can you
Just
stop and say hi?
would love to do a very, very brief introduction, but I'm a former newspaper photographer, editor, etc. So have a little bit of experience with this sort of thing, but very excited to learn more about ornithology and this process in general. But I was so impressed. Diane just said that the members are the biggest strength. That seems such an understatement. It's remarkable to me that this is an all volunteer organization. What goes on here and the atlas and everything that is going on, I'm just so impressed and thrilled to play a small part in this team.
Typically, we would have the nominating chair presenting the slate of officers and the slate of proposed directors. Shirley Devan was unable to join us. She had a 9-month-old commitment. So in her absence, I will show you on the screen, you've got the slate of officers, me continuing for president, Vice President Monica Hole. Monica stepped in to fill a vacancy during this year. She was elected vice president, and that was just for the remainder of the year. So she has agreed to serve as vice president. We're thrilled. Do you want folks to say hello real quick, like Monica, or is Monica here? Not
I am.
because we didn't plan this, so.
You're in Harvard.
You're in the woods, Monica.
I'm happy to say hello if you want me to.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, just wanted to say that we appreciate, I appreciate the opportunity to serve, and certainly the folks who've been serving on the executive board, the council of the board of the VSO have been doing an amazing job, and so I'm just going to be running and trying to catch up. So I appreciate the opportunity to serve in this position.
Thank you, Monica. And then for Secretary, Rebecca Curran, and I know you're here. There you are. You want to say hi, Rebecca, so people can sort of meet you? She's waving. Don't hear you, but okay.
Well, it says the audio is on, so
Yep, we hear you.
It's good now.
limited skill set. Thank you all for letting me be part of this. This is really a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot.
Thank you, Rebecca. For Treasurer, Dixie Summers, who's already said plenty, but do you want to say a few more words?
No.
And then Membership Secretary, who keeps the wheels rolling behind the scenes in a huge way, Shirley Devan. So that's the slate of officers. What we'd like to do is get a motion to approve the slate of officers, and then we'll open this to a vote, and we would ask that only VSO members vote when the time comes. So would somebody like to make a motion to accept the slate of officers?
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Donna Mateski de Sanchez.
Thank you. You got that, Rebecca? For our minutes. And then if we could go to the vote.
I will start the poll. Okay, the results are 43 votes, all of whom are yes. So thank you. Okay, and then here's the directors.
Okay, what I'd like to say first is rotating off this year. would have been Monica, but she is now vice president, but also Nick Newberry. So want to say thank you to Nick. He served a 3-year term, and we appreciate that. So again, Nick Newberry is rotating off, and want to say thank you so much, Nick. All righty, Jeff Trollinger. Now these terms are for they're 3-year terms. We call it the class of 2029 historically. Jeff is a 40-year employee of the Department of Wildlife Resources. He's shaking his head. As that employee, he managed the Watchable Wildlife Program and led the team that developed the Virginia Bird and Wildlife Trail. He oversaw the DWR team that finalized the Atlas data. And by the way, not to age him, but he helped publish the first Virginia Bird Atlas of like 30 years prior, 1989 or something. He joined the VSO in 2011 and served as president from 2015 to 2017. We sent out his full bio. I'm just doing summaries here. Jeff, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Assuming I can get the audio to come back on. Hi, everybody. Most of you, if you don't know my face, you at least know my name because you've probably seen it on the post office wall. It's a very bad picture, so don't take that verbatim. I am honored to be back on the board with the VSO. I will be retiring after 40 years in December. So this is part of my retirement plan. Congratulations, y'all. You're part of my retirement plan. The other part of my retirement plan has already also started. I now bake on every Friday at Belty's restaurant in Nelliesford. So if you are ever in beautiful downtown Nelliesford, please stop by for breakfast or lunch. And we will be glad to serve you because my husband also works there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So.
Awesome. You can bring cookies to the board meeting.
I can.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Our second nominee for director is Tom Rapp. Tom was a founding parent of the original Blue Ridge Young Birders Club, which successfully raised some now well-known birders, including Gabriel Maple, Baxter Beamer, and Tom's own son, Andrew Rapp. The original club disbanded when its fledglings took flight. About 2 years ago, Tom agreed to help resurrect the club as part of the Piedmont Bird Club, and he's been one of the leaders since. His interest in birds was inspired by an older brother, and when Tom was about 12 years old, his father started taking him to Rockingham Bird Club meetings and field trips. His mentors included many of the Rockingham Bird Club's founding members, including Charles Ziegenfuss and Claire Mellinger. And I'm going to just say something funny here. When Shirley said that when she called Tom, he said, "Are you sure you didn't mean to call a different Rapp?" But so, Tom, would you like to say hi to everybody?
Hey, folks. Yes, that is very true. I was wondering if Shirley had the right Rapp when she called because while I've been at birding, if you will, for I guess over 50 years now, I certainly don't have the credentials of many of you listening in terms of higher education or professorship and that sort of thing. But at least as far as being out in the field and experienced with just being out there, I thought, well, I can offer that. And I certainly enjoyed my assisting with the Young Birders Club when Andrew went through, and now it brings me great joy to do it again now, starting up. So if it works out such that I become one of the directors, I would love to somehow encourage other organizations around the state to develop such youth groups. So that's my hope.
That's great, Tom. Thank you so much. Dixie, are you ready? Oh, I think we need a motion.
We do.
Can I get a motion to approve the nominees for directors? We definitely need a motion.
So move.
John, thank you. John Pancake, Rebecca. And a second?
I second.
Kathy Richardson. Thank you, Kathy. So I think we're ready to vote. Dixie,
Yeah.
give those instructions again, just to be sure.
Yeah, so this is another poll, same as process as last time. When I hit the poll, the question will come up and you can click yes or no and then submit your answer. So I'm going to start the poll. Okay, let me end the poll. And we have 46 yeses and no no's. So stop sharing. And that's the polls.
Okay, thank you, Dixie. I would now like to introduce Meredith Bell. Shirley, again, received the nominations for and selected the awardees. And since she's not able to be with us this evening, Meredith has agreed to announce the awards. So Meredith, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. We're going to start with the James Eike Service Award, which recognizes a VSO member for outstanding service to the VSO. The award honors James Eike, VSO member from 1933 until his death in 1983. His long, faithful service and his dedication and enthusiasm in promoting the VSO earned him a unique status in the organization. The VSO is pleased to present the 2026 James Eike Service Award to Dr. Ashley Peele, avian ecologist for the American Bird Conservancy and our keynote speaker this evening. Ashley played a central role in advancing the second Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas by coordinating survey efforts, supporting volunteers, and ensuring that the resulting data are both scientifically rigorous and broadly useful. Throughout this effort, hundreds of thousands of observations have been collected, serving as a foundational resource for research, conservation, and bird study for years to come. The Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas Planning Committee hired Ashley as the Atlas coordinator in 2015. Following approval of funding by the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, now the Department of Wildlife Resources. Ashley did not have much time before the Atlas fieldwork needed to begin. She quickly developed timelines, manuals, and training materials. She also recruited and trained regional coordinators, Atlas volunteers, and hired Atlas field technicians. One of the biggest obstacles was how to collect the Atlas data, as paper records used in the first Atlas were no longer a viable option. Ashley negotiated and developed standards with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to use eBird for the Virginia Atlas, making Virginia only the second state after Wisconsin to use this approach. It was a small miracle that the Atlas work began on time in 2016, and it was pretty much due to Ashley's dedication. Throughout the 5 years of field work, Ashley was its biggest cheerleader. For many of Virginia's birders, Ashley was the face and the champion of the Atlas. She held rallies to cover undersurveyed blocks, answered questions, offered guidance, made presentations, and led numerous Atlas field trips. Following the field work, Ashley carried out the meticulous process of data validation. Collaborating with Elizabeth Hunter at Virginia Tech, she conducted the analysis that yielded the maps, models, charts, and other components of the Atlas's final output. Even after transitioning to her current job at the American Bird Conservancy, Ashley continues to contribute to the Atlas Final Products Committee, leading to the publication of the Atlas results in late 2025. A defining strength of Ashley's work is her ability to inspire and collaborate with the many volunteers who made the Atlas possible. She approached the project with genuine enthusiasm and a passion for birds and field work. In 2025, Ashley was elected to the VSO Board of Directors and participates in the VSO Conservation Committee. for her outstanding service to Virginia's ornithological community, her leadership in one of the state's most significant bird monitoring efforts, and her inspiring engagement with volunteers. The VSO is pleased to present the 2026 Eike Award to Dr. Ashley Peele. Ashley, would you like to make a comment or say a few words?
Oh, I didn't know I was going to have to say something. I'm going to be talking a lot tonight. No, I'll just say, Meredith, I can't remember the last time someone has made me blush, but I'm sitting here like hot and blushing after that. That was so kind. I'll just say quickly that I've had the privilege of knowing and working with many past Eike Award recipients, which makes this even more meaningful to me. So I'm truly honored to receive it. And I have to say that, you know, I came to Virginia as a baby ecologist to run the Breeding Bird Atlas project, as you said, and not only did that opportunity really help set me on a career path that I'm deeply grateful for and passionate about, but it also immersed me in this absolutely incredible community of practice and passion that is the Virginia birding community. I can't tell you how many of you I have gotten to stay in your homes and gotten to share drinks and coffee, and frankly, you're a family as much as you are a community of colleagues. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all of you.
It's so well deserved. And we're excited about hearing from you again very shortly. The next award is the Jackson M. Abbot Conservation Award, which is given to individuals or organizations that have demonstrated outstanding conservation work in Virginia. The award honors Jackson M. Abbot for his lifelong devotion to conservation and his effective work on its behalf. The VSO is pleased to present the 2026 Jackson Abbot Award to Sergio Harding, non-game bird conservation biologist at the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. Sergio has been instrumental in the success of Virginia's second breeding bird atlas. The atlas is a major contribution to bird conservation in Virginia, providing readily accessible, detailed, and critical information on breeding distribution and trends that will support conservation actions into the future. After Sergio joined the original group attempting to initiate the second Atlas project, it gained momentum. He played a pivotal role in developing the initial proposal and budget for state funding. Persistence was rewarded with funding a year later. Sergio served as an active DGIF representative on the newly created Atlas Steering Committee. He participated in the technical and data teams, as well as the committee to search for and hire the Atlas coordinator, Ashley Peele. For the 5 years of data collection and beyond, he worked closely with Ashley, including the 2 years of data cleanup and analysis. As the field work neared completion in 2020, Sergio approached the VSO board with a plan for the creation of the Atlas Final Products Committee to plan and manage publication of the Atlas. The board agreed and appointed VSO members. As the committee got to work, Sergio became the de facto chair, assuming the significant workload of scheduling, organizing, and leading meetings, disseminating meeting minutes, including action items, following up on decisions, and generally keeping the group on track. This was no easy task. The committee met 50 times from late 2020 through April 2026, with more to come. As the team leader, Sergio kept the committee involved in making the hundreds of decisions required about the species accounts and other content, the publication format, and eventually the website design. In addition, he authored several sections and carefully reviewed and edited many of the species accounts, especially those for species of greatest conservation need, to ensure their accuracy and quality. Sergio participated in the selection of Austin Kane as the Atlas managing editor, the 2 species account authors, and the web developer. He worked closely with Austin to coordinate the production of website content and design decisions. While leading the Atlas work, Sergio also kept up with his day job of conserving Virginia's birds. During this time, the department completed the 2025 Wildlife Action Plan, where Sergio put the Atlas data to work in identifying avian species of greatest conservation need and conservation actions. Sergio's conservation work has displayed leadership, foresight, teamwork, persistence, and careful attention to quality. The Atlas would not have been published as a high-quality conservation resource without Sergio's leadership and unwavering dedication. His impact on Virginia's wildlife certainly deserves recognition through the VSO's Jackson M. Abbot Conservation Award. And unfortunately, Sergio is not able to join us tonight, but through this recording, he will be able to see and hear this recognition. And the final award is the Mitchell A. Byrd Award, which recognizes scientific achievement in the field of ornithology. The award honors Mitchell Byrd for his long, impactful career of avian research and fieldwork, as you heard about earlier this evening. The VSO is pleased to present the Byrd Award to Dr. Stephen L. Hopp, retired professor in the Environmental Studies program at Emory and Henry University. For many years, Dr. Hopp has conducted field studies with vireos. His main interest is in their vocal behavior, but he has broadly studied their natural history, including life history strategies, breeding ecology, and behavior on their wintering grounds. As a graduate student, he discovered the fascinating interdisciplinary study of animal communication. He investigated hearing mechanisms in primates and how the hearing of different species predisposed them to the use of their vocal signals. After graduate school, Dr. Hopp's research focused on field studies with the white-eyed vireo. Now, while it seems like a huge change from work with primates, in practice, those two animal groups, songbirds and non-human primates, are two of the most studied animal groups for vocal communication. Dr. Hopp studied white-eyed vireos in Virginia for 10 years, then shifted to similar studies with Bell's vireo in Arizona, as well as vireo species that inhabit the various Greater Antilles Islands. He published papers on various aspects of their natural history and their vocal communication, and he became very interested in the evolution of their vocal systems. He conducted research trips to study the interactions between the endemic species and their migratory counterparts. He is the sole author of the white-eyed vireo entry and co-author of the Bell's vireo entry in the widely used scholarly resource, Birds of the World. Among many other publications, Dr. Hopp recently published in the Wilson's Journey of Ornithology a paper highlighting the use of northern spicebush berries by birds and mammals in southern Appalachia. At Emory and Henry University, he taught in the Environmental Studies program until his retirement in 2024. He continued to serve as a popular speaker on campus, delivering programs on birding adventures and wildlife studies. Dr. Hopp is president of the board of directors of the Blue Ridge Discovery Center, an organization focused on providing nature education to the Mount Rogers community and a recent recipient of VSO support for scholarships. Dr. Hopp is always ready to share his enthusiasm and knowledge of the avian world and frequently leads popular bird walks for the community. He was a regional coordinator for the second Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas, documenting extensive data and encouraging other birders in Southwest Virginia to participate. He is a pivotal member of the Glade Spring Christmas Bird team. His many years of commitment to the scientific study of birds make Stephen Hopp an excellent recipient of the Mitchell A. Byrd Award. He has never ceased to study, publish, and participate in the research that contributes to a greater understanding of birds, and he shows no sign of stopping. Dr. Hopp, congratulations, and would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you so much, Meredith. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. I don't know who wrote that or where you came up with all of that, but it impressed me. What you didn't say is that my interest in the different species of vireo in the Caribbean islands was really just an excuse to go visit the Caribbean islands in the winter. It's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it. So I'm truly honored to be mentioned in the same paragraph with Mitchell Byrd. I was lucky enough to meet him in the past many years ago, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your service and congratulations. And I will turn it now back over to Diane to introduce Ashley as our speaker.
Thank you, Meredith, and thanks so much to all of you most deserving award winners. I'll add, I don't know if Shirley mentioned that 2 of the awards required a letter of nomination and 2 letters of support. And one, I think, just a nomination. And I forget off the top of my head which one that was, but I know that it can't just be your best friend writing a writing a letter. But yeah, great stuff and congratulations, everyone. So now, if Ashley is done blushing, I think we've said plenty about her. I will say again, she was just amazing with the Atlas and with pulling people together and keeping us all in line, and a lot of fun to be around on top of it. So I'll say no more. Ashley, the floor is yours. We're really looking forward to this.
All right. Thank you, Diane. So while I am getting my talk up and going, I did just want to set the stage a little bit for where we're going tonight, what I want to talk about. So obviously, I know a lot of folks came to hear about the Breeding Bird Atlas and results, but I also know that many of you have already heard me talk a lot about the BBA and BBA results. And so what I thought I'd do tonight is take a little bit of a different tack and kind of weave the Breeding Bird Atlas project in with my current job, my current role, because really what I want you to learn tonight is just how, or what I would like you to take away, is how pivotal community science-based tools have become for bird conservation. So really the story I want to tell tonight is how several tools, including in a big way the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas project, are really key in informing how we approach bird conservation, planning, management in everywhere across the US, but I'm going to focus specifically on obviously Virginia and also the broader Appalachian region, since that is now my area of focus. So that's where we're headed tonight. Hopefully you won't now leave because it's not what you thought. All right, let me get my slides pulled up here. And okay, are you guys seeing the big screen now? Diane, thumbs up. Looks good. Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, as I was just alluding to, what we're going to really get into tonight is bird conservation powered by community science. And you guys already heard a lot about me, so I will not talk about myself much, just to say that I am a Appalachian by roots, and I'm a bird nerd. I'm an avian ecologist. I'm a mama, and I am a Lord help me, a talker. So get ready for tonight. Most of y'all probably already knew that. And again, so what we're going to get into tonight, our overarching topics, I'm going to briefly talk about what are the migratory bird joint ventures, because that's the entity I work for now. I'm going to touch on the importance of Appalachia because I think it's interesting, and I think a lot of folks don't consider why the Appalachian region broadly is so important for migratory birds. And then really we're going to get into the meat of it, which is how are we leveraging community science for bird conservation? And we're really going to focus on 2 key tools for that. Obviously the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas, and then also the eBird status and trends data products that are powered by all of the birding effort that many of y'all are doing on a regular basis. But just to quickly talk about the migratory bird joint ventures, I hope you'll indulge me, but a lot of folks in my experience, especially in the birding community, they haven't heard of us. They don't know what the migratory bird joint ventures are. They don't know what we do, even though what we do is coordinate bird conservation across North America in a big way. So I just wanted to touch on this briefly and say there are 23 habitat joint ventures and 3 species joint ventures in North America. And what we are big partnerships. And what the folks who work for joint ventures do is coordinate these huge regional partnerships to help deliver things like habitat management for wildlife. We do a lot of ecosystem coordination, and we work with communities that live in our given geographies. And mine specifically, as I've said, is the Appalachian Mountains Joint Venture. And so we are focused, our mission really is to restore and sustain viable populations of our birds and the habitats. And again, how we get at that is through effective collaborative partnerships. So the VSO is a great example of a regional organization that's a key partner for us in achieving our work and accomplishing our jobs. So, and I couldn't forget to mention that my joint venture is one of several that are under the umbrella of the American Bird Conservancy. They are our basically administrative home and really help support in a really fundamental way the joint ventures that are under the umbrella of that organization. So again, just for a second, I want to talk about why Appalachia is so important for birds and migratory birds in particular. And there's several reasons, right? A lot of this may seem intuitive, but I think it's interesting to dig in a little bit and think about it. So food. Food is one of the biggest ones. There for a long time was what we called the North American bias, where everybody thought of migratory birds as our birds, North American birds who have adapted, evolved to go south for the winter, when in fact it is the opposite. Migratory birds have evolved to come north for the breeding season to take advantage of the tremendous glut that is, you know, spring, summer, even fall food resources in the temperate zone. And in addition to that big glut of food, we also have tremendous habitat diversity, right? If you think about Virginia, notorious Virginia, our super long state. If we drive east to west across Virginia, you pass through an incredible array of habitats. And all of those habitats are chock full of a lot of different bird species because of the number of niches created there. And additionally, what's interesting to think about Appalachia in particular is that it has a relatively lower land conversion rate compared to, say, the Eastern Seaboard. You know, folks, those of you who live in southeastern Virginia or in northern Virginia are obviously very well acquainted with how much land conversion is happening and habitat loss. So Appalachia is an important region for that because we have less of that going on, at least for the time being. And I was just going to briefly say another thing that's really important to consider about Appalachia and why it's so significant for our breeding birds is that we have a really dynamic range of forest conditions. We have everything from mature old growth forests, high elevation systems like spruce fir habitat, all the way down to young forest open habitat within the matrix of these dynamic forest systems. And the reason that is important is that birds don't need monocultures, right? If we want a diversity of birds on the landscape, we don't need a vast sea of trees that are the same age. We need a dynamic mix of forest age classes on the landscape. So Appalachia, because it is such a dynamic forest system, again, has so many different niches for our different bird species. And of course, it also has a number of other habitats other than just forests, right? We have our riparian corridors, our open habitats, and even our agricultural landscapes that are really important for some of our specific bird species. So we have this incredible biodiversity, not just among birds, but among all taxa. Frankly, this is true for the whole state of Virginia, right? Not just Appalachia. And with that high biodiversity, I couldn't resist being cheesy and say comes great responsibility. We have a tremendous stewardship responsibility because we have such tremendous natural resources within our state. So that is why I have a job. It's because we have to spend a lot of time thinking about how to effectively coordinate and deliver conservation across this varied and interesting and challenging landscape. So now I'm going to shift and talk about something that may seem like an obvious answer. What is community science? Let's dig into that for a moment. And I wanted to start with thinking about it broadly, because sometimes I think we sort of give ourselves a fairly narrow definition of what community science can be and what it looks like. And I wanted to point out that really at its core, it's just public engagement in scientific data collection or scientific data review or implementation of things like habitat management. And I underscore that it is not just one thing because, in the past, we've had folks say, well, I can't really get out and bird that much anymore. I guess there's not a place for me in the citizen science world. When in fact, there are quite a few citizen science projects out there now that are looking to folks to help do things like review data, stuff that you can just do at home from a computer if you're interested in that sort of thing. Let's talk a little bit more about what is the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas Project. Now, I'm going to make a leap and assume that most of you know what it is. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what it is and how it was done, because again, I think many of you have heard a lot of talks about it, but very broadly, I was just going to remind us that the second Virginia Bird Atlas, which we completed data collection on in 2020, was the second atlas. The first one was completed in 1989, and as someone alluded to, Jeff Trollinger was very involved in that project, and I think a number of you were involved in participating in that first and the second project, which is pretty tremendous continuity within the Virginia birding community. And so I just wanted to acknowledge all the volunteers that contributed and participated in this project, especially the folks who came back for round 2, because atlases are tough. They are fun and rewarding, but they are a lot of effort. Diane alluded to how much training goes into participating in an atlas. And this time around, since we were using the eBird platform for data collection, that meant that there was often a whole new skill set that folks had to learn if they had not already been using eBird. And I know that because I trained many people to use eBird for the first time so that they could participate in this atlas. So there are many, many things I could call out about the Virginia birding community that has always impressed me. But the number of people who were willing to dig in and sit down and do the not fun part, which is sit inside with me and go through how to do data entry on eBird and learn how to do it on their phone, I give you tremendous credit and thank you for making that effort and making the time to figure it out. And the many, many folks who just invested, frankly, hundreds and in some cases thousands of hours in this project. It's frankly phenomenal. So with that very broad 10,000 foot backdrop, what I thought I would do is just walk through a few of the products, essentially the data products, the types of results that came out of all those 5 years of data collection, all the data review, all the analysis, transforming it into digestible, interesting tools for not only the public to engage with and learn more about the bird community from, but also for conservation planners, for managers like myself, like Sergio. I know Steve, all 3 of our awardees tonight are people who were deeply involved with the Atlas. I should say Steve was one of our regional coordinators. I don't remember if that was mentioned, but Steve was the Southwest Virginia Atlas regional coordinator. So I have to shout that out too. He has served in many, many roles in the state, which we greatly appreciate. But anyway, so what I thought I'd do is just walk through kind of the key data products that you can see and read about and use and access if you get into the Virginia Bird Atlas website. And the reason I'm going to go through these tools is in a little bit, I'm going to talk about how we are actively applying those tools to conservation challenges and questions and needs nowadays. Because again, really what I want us to get from is, this is really cool. We worked really hard and produced this amazing thing. And now here's how we're using it. And here's how it is spurring new questions and new projects that are continuing to help push us in the right direction when it comes to bird conservation. Because the Atlas was not just this one thing that we did and it's done. It's set a stage and it is helping us keep pushing, again, the direction we need to go for Virginia's birds. So to get into the data products, or the BBA data tools, rather, I'm going to walk through each briefly. Don't worry, I won't be long-winded on these, but I just wanted everyone to be on the same page about some of the resources that came out of it. So the first one, this is sort of, people often think of this as like the flagship of breeding bird atlases, the breeding evidence maps, which are maps of all the behavioral observations collected by volunteers for a given species. And on this map, the color coding shows you essentially the strength of breeding evidence. So the yellow blocks are where birds were possible breeders, pink is where they're probable, purple is where they are confirmed breeders. And the reason the breeding evidence maps are, well, there's many reasons why they're interesting and of note, but they're one of the things that make breeding bird atlases unique. There's very, very few other projects out there that actually collect and document breeding behavior for the sake of getting at evidence of breeding. And this is a really important distinction because one of the challenges we have in kind of the bird conservation and science space is that if you're only ever looking at presence, right? If you're just looking at whether the birds are there and saying, we're good, we're done, let's move on, then sometimes you miss how things are shifting with the population. You miss what is changing and happening. So it's useful to understand where we actually still have evidence that the birds are truly breeding and where we may be seeing shifts in what's happening with the population. So I always like to call out that these breeding evidence maps are unique to breeding bird atlases, and they're really valuable because they provide a layer of information you really can't get at anywhere else, especially when we're talking about for all of the birds in a given state. So the next tool is the breeding distribution map. This is simply put, this is a modeled product. So this means we used a mathematical model to generate this. And it is essentially the estimated probability that a given bird is going to show up somewhere in Virginia in one of these pixels. So, highest probability in the dark green, lowest probability that a bird's going to be somewhere in light yellow. It's a heat map, right? And occurrence maps are useful for a lot of reasons. Again, it's essentially just a slightly fancier version of bird distribution. All right, I'm going to jump over to another somewhat unique map for breeding bird atlases, at least historically. Not all atlases are able to model change or look at how populations have changed over time. But we were able to, through some creative modeling with our first atlas data set and our second, we were able to get at change in distribution of birds for a subset of our species from the first to second atlas. And this is a really valuable tool because we have very few resources that allow us to really look at how bird populations have changed over time, especially at the scale, with the granularity and the resolution that we can with the breeding bird atlas. So these maps, just to orient you and give you a little help with interpretation, if you haven't looked at these before, the light yellow areas are where bird populations are stable. The blue areas are where bird populations have declined since the 80s. And I just realized I picked a bad map because it doesn't really show anywhere with red indicating an increase in occupancy. That is because I picked eastern meadowlark, which is a grassland species that is unfortunately not doing well across its range. It's actually, relatively speaking, doing okay in Virginia from an occupancy standpoint, but we have lost a lot of those birds in our more urban areas due to habitat loss and whatnot. So sorry I didn't pick one that had red on it, but we'll look at some happier stories in a minute. And then the last one I wanted to show, the last data product or tool that came out of the Atlas project, are the predicted abundance maps. And these maps are a little different from the rest in that we were able to build these abundance models to get at how many birds are on the landscape using a companion part of the Atlas project, which is we had field technicians, which I helped coordinate this part as well. We had field technicians out on the landscape doing extensive point counts all over the state, which are much shorter, faster, but very detailed counts. And we're able to use that data to estimate population size. So for example, in this case, we estimated that there are roughly 322,000 eastern meadowlarks in Virginia in a given year over the course of the Atlas project. We were able to generate these more detailed abundance maps that give you a little bit higher resolution sense of how eastern meadowlarks are distributed across the state. And yeah, so this is the last of the BBA data tools that I was going to reference during this section. But we're going to kind of pop back and forth and reference some of these tools as we go along. But next, again, kind of to set the stage for the rest of the talk, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about what is eBird, because not only was it the host for our Atlas data collection, but because birders across the world are now using it to log their birding observations, more and more breeding bird atlas projects. Frankly, most of them these days are being hosted in eBird. And what that is allowing to happen is this tremendous sort of bloom in the science that is possible from the databases being collected within eBird. And I should add that this map shows you data collection from around the world that goes into eBird. It's a little hard to see, but one of the things I like to point out, which let me see if I can get my little laser pointer going. One of the things I think it's fun to point out if you've never looked at these maps is that if you see these lines, these gold lines cutting through places like the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, those are birding observations from shipping lanes. So eBird has sort of emerged so much that you've got people on shipping vessels birding their pelagic observations frequently. So it truly has become a global resource, which is exciting, and again is going to help explain why they are able to produce the type of science and models that they are, which are wonderful complements to what we have done with the Breeding Bird Atlas project. And more specifically, what we're going to talk about and reference tonight are the eBird status and trends products, which, just like the BBA data products, these are models and resources that are being produced and essentially are the backbone of these conservation planning tools emerging from the eBird database. So again, for context, the birding observations that you are putting into eBird, the science team at Cornell Lab of Ornithology is using that information to produce these really tremendous data tools and resources that we use, frankly, every day. So that's why I thought it would be interesting to talk about them a little bit too tonight. So the two we're going to focus on, I'm going to keep this brief. The two we're going to talk about tonight are the population trend maps coming out of the eBird status and trends. So this is an example of one for cerulean warblers and our geography. What's cool about these maps is they are a very high resolution when we're talking about population trends. So these are modeled at a 27 by 27 kilometer scale, which again is prior to these models, we would be lucky if we could model in a reliable way bird populations across, say, the entire Appalachian mountain range. So having effective trend models, trend estimates for that small of a scale where we can zoom in and really look at what's going on more locally with bird populations is pretty unprecedented. And in addition to the trend maps, there are also, similar to some of our data products from the BBA, they are producing these relative abundance maps, which are kind of like occupancy maps, occurrence maps on steroids. And again, these maps are at an even finer resolution. So you can zoom in all the way down to the 3 by 3 kilometer scale and know what the relative abundance of a given species of bird is at that spatial scale, which again is kind of unprecedented in the bird science and conservation realm. Outside of, say, really focused research projects for a single species, we just didn't have tools of this caliber for many years. So why talk about both, right? Why focus on these? Again, Virginia was the second state to use eBird as an atlas. All of our atlas data is helping to feed these global models. The BBA data, also, I think it's important for you all to know that the BBA data significantly improved the modeling for Virginia and for, frankly, the entire region within the eBird ecosystem. So all that effort we put into getting all that information and to doing our complete checklists, all the things I badgered the volunteers about for many years, because we held the line and we did the data collection right, it was able to inform these eBird status and trends models as well, and it dramatically improved, again, the modeling that they could do for Virginia and for our region. So there's a lot of little things I'm going to keep hammering home, because like, guys, it's good. It's really awesome what we accomplished and all the ripple effects of it, not just the BBA, but how it's kind of rippled outward. And the other point is that birds don't care about state lines. So that's why I'm going to harp a little bit about Appalachia. And we're not just going to look at Virginia. We're going to look a little bit more broadly because the birds don't care about state geographies. So what I thought would be hopefully interesting for you guys is to kind of approach this through several case studies and say, okay, we know that these resources, the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas, in combination with these eBird status and trends products, are incredible tools for conservation, right? They're helping us fill information gaps. They're available to anyone. They're adaptable, all these cool things. But what does that actually mean? What's that translate to, right? So what I thought I would do is do a few case studies. And the first one is just going to be Virginia, not just, is going to be conservation highlights from the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas. So what are some of the interesting things we learned from that? Then I thought I'd do a habitat spotlight and zoom in on a group of species that are dependent on young forest or early successional habitat as another illustration of how we're using these tools. And then lastly, we're going to zoom even more and we're going to talk about eastern whippoorwills, because while things are not looking great for nightjars broadly, there are some really fascinating, interesting things going on with eastern whippoorwills that we really weren't clocking and aware of until the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas and until these eBird status and trends models started coming out for our whole region. So that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the night. I know it's already late. I'm going to try to keep it exciting, guys. Stick with me. Okay. So let's talk about some big picture conservation lessons, highlights that came out of the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas. We're going to try to get the downer stuff out of the way first and talk about, and all I'm going to say is that we had a number of species we lost effectively that are no longer consistent breeders within the state of Virginia that used to be back in the 80s. A lot of these are, or a number of these are marsh species. A couple of our duck species, things like upland sandpiper, not a marsh species, but Buick's wren, sedge wren, Bachman sparrows, ring-necked pheasant. Well, they weren't native anyway, but so we have seen declines. We have seen some losses. We've also seen some interesting gains for a number of reasons. I think interesting ones to call out and note would be, Anhinga, black-necked stilt. Those are both more southern breeders that have been slowly tracking northward. And we all know why. Climate change is pushing a lot of species outside of their traditional range as conditions change, as climate shifts. And that's what we're seeing. Oh, and Mississippi kite as well. So we've got, a handful of species that are moving northward. And then we've also got some just interesting stuff happening, like the common merganser, which common mergansers are actually pushing north to south in Virginia. And what we're seeing is a big expansion of common mergansers breeding along our major riverine corridors or river corridors. But again, kind of coming down from the north and then pushing into more western and southern Virginia. And the other two species I have to call out, of course, are the painted bunting and the merlin, which we had the first ever confirmed, well-documented breeding records of those species for the state during the second Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas project. The merlin's a little fuzzier. I have had many conversations with folks in Southwest Virginia who have said, oh, we've had them breeding up at Mount Rogers for years, but they just weren't well documented. So it's possible, but so I just had to get out in front of that because I'm just waiting for somebody to put a comment in the chat about that. I know, it's a little fuzzy, but we documented it well this time. And the painted bunting was just wild and exciting. It's going to be interesting to see if we keep seeing them tracking north along the coast or not. I thought I would also briefly touch a little bit more on this idea of range, breeding distribution, expansion, and contraction, because we are seeing both. Just like we have lost species, in gained species, we are seeing population distribution shifting quite a bit across the state. So an interesting one to think about when we talk about expansion are common ravens. They historically were, sort of a species of the mountains, species that nested in rocky areas, cliff faces, bridges in some cases, or in many cases, but they have really pushed eastward in a big way, particularly in Northern Virginia, where there are far more common raven breeding in, that sector of the state than there ever were historically. On the flip side, we have a species like the American redstart, where we have seen some pretty decent declines across the state. They were never as abundant in the Piedmont or the coastal plain. They've always been more abundant in the mountains, but historically, there were more of them in the Piedmont and in the coastal plain than there are now. And so we have seen these pretty significant declines, contractions in in the probability that they're going to occur in the eastern 2/3 of the state. And just to touch on a few more species, I'm not going to show all the maps. I just thought it would be interesting to highlight. We've seen a lot of declines of species that are dependent on open habitats, both early successional which is young forest, and grassland in particular. Our grassland species are really struggling. So this is everything from, our barn owls to our loggerhead shrikes, to our bobwhite quail, yellow-breasted chats, horned larks. And of course, like I said, our nightjars, including our common nighthawk, are species that are really struggling right now. And additionally, if we think about our forested habitats, again, seeing a lot of range contractions, ruffed grouse, eastern whippoorwill, I won't go through all of them. I think you guys get the idea. But, you know, the atlas confirmed what we already knew in many ways, which is that a lot of our bird populations are in trouble. We are in a little bit later going to get into some reasons for hope and some reasons why, again, I harp on a lot about Appalachia, because there are a lot of indications that Appalachia is going to become an increasingly, already is, and is only going to become an increasingly important refugia for many of our bird species, frankly, not just our forest dwelling species, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So before I move on to the next case study, one of the things I wanted to highlight is that, again, you know, it doesn't end with the atlas being completed. That's sort of, I view that as a beginning, which not really a beginning, it's a continuity, it's a continuation. But I did want to call out a specific project that is rooted and utilized, not rooted, but is utilizing the atlas databases that we built in a really tangible way right now to help inform some really cool, interesting research and applied conservation. And actually, I think there are some folks on the call who are actively involved with this project. It's called the Forest for Birds and People project that my organization, my colleagues and I are working on with the University of Maryland, our colleagues at the Center for Environmental Studies. We got a grant from National Science Foundation to conduct a major project, but that is also what the part I want to call out. I could spend all night talking about this project. So the main thing I want to call out is that it is utilizing atlas data to study the relationship between forest structure and bird usage, both on migration and during the breeding season. So my colleagues, who are much smarter than me when it comes to data modeling and building these just enormous data resources, are incorporating the atlas data into these very detailed forest information databases they have to build some really cool predictive models. So just, that's all I'm going to say about it for now, but I just wanted to highlight that my hope is that we will continue to see more and more projects utilizing this data resource to ask even more questions, even more detailed questions, and put it to really good use for our birds, for our people, for the ecosystems in Virginia. All right, I'm going to jump to the second case study. Oh boy, I've been up too long today. The second case study, which is finding the hotspots for young forest birds. I mentioned to you guys that early successional species or young forest species, like the yellow-breasted chat, for example, have experienced and continue to experience a lot of declines. This is a group that, a habitat-specific group that we've known we're in trouble for a long time. Another species that's probably more familiar to you that falls into this same group is the golden wing warbler. A lot of conservation focus and effort has gone into golden wings. And so one of the things I wanted to underscore is that the Atlas project, again, added to this database of knowledge and understanding of how these already declining species were doing. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a bummer, right? We were not surprised to see that, you know, yellow-breasted chats have really declined pretty significantly in Virginia over the last 30 plus years. And it's helpful for us to have, again, a more granular, detailed view of where these birds are in the state. And so obviously, as I was saying, you know, all of these species that I've included here are facing declines. The VA-BBA2, you know, the Atlas confirmed this. And then we asked the question, so what else can we learn? Can we dig into these data tools and learn and ask some more questions? So very quickly, what I was going to talk about is something that I'm doing as part of my current job, which is taking these maps that are produced for each species, right? Each species in Virginia and across Appalachia, we get these really detailed map layers that folks like me can take and do some interesting exercises with. And what we decided to do was take yellow-breasted chat, was to take a number of these early successional, these young forest species, and layer these maps together and do some stats and normalization and basically say, can we find hotspots? Are there hotspots in Appalachia for young forest species that will jump out at us if we layer all these birds together? And so this is an example of what we got out of that layering exercise. So this map shows you, again, for about 6, 7 early successional species, where in our geography is lighting up for those birds. And for us at the Appalachian Mountains, since we're concerned about this whole geography, not just Virginia, it really jumped out at us that, okay, most of our early successional species are hanging out and breeding in southeastern Ohio, that far northwestern corner of West Virginia, down through the Cumberland region of eastern Kentucky and Tennessee. And obviously, we have much lower densities of them through the more eastern corridor of our geography. I'm going to jump over this and just say, so briefly, where did that lead? What are we doing? Well, we're doing a lot of work in Ohio with some very clever forestry folks, where we're layering this bird data in with really cool, detailed forestry databases to figure out if there are some easy, low-hanging fruit things we can do to collaborate and help make sure that the right habitats stay on the ground in Ohio, since obviously Ohio is looking really important for these young forest species. Doing something similar in the Cumberland Plateau. But additionally, what this has shown us is that we need to continue really pushing and emphasizing young forest habitat management throughout the Appalachian geography, including Virginia. Those species are struggling in the state, and so we really need to keep pushing to make sure that young forest habitat stays on the landscape. And young forest habitat, we only really get that with the exception of something like a Hurricane Helene that comes through and delivers some young forest habitat, whether we want it or not. For the most part, we have to intentionally try to put young forest habitat on the landscape, whether that's through fire or different forest management practices. That's one of the reasons this group of birds has declined, is because we are suppressing a lot of the natural processes that would have produced young forest on the landscape. So again, just showing us both through the BBA and some of these additional tools that we need to keep the pressure on to make sure some amount of young forest stays on the landscape so there's habitat for these species. All right, now I'm going to jump to our last example. And this is one of my favorite species to talk about because I'm a little obsessed with them, our singers in the smoke here in Appalachia and frankly throughout the East. I thought I would take a second and say why focus on eastern whippoorwills, aside from the fact that they're awesome and I love them. Eastern whippoorwills are a great example of a species that I would call a canary in the coal mine for our ecological health, for the ecological health of our planet, frankly, but the ecosystems that we also share with these animals. They're aerial insectivores. They forage at night on big moths. Moths are the primary food source for them when they are here in the breeding season, feeding chicks. Big moths are where it's at. And so when we see declines in species that are such important aerial insectivores and such important predators, it's one of the signs to us, obviously we've all heard and known for a while that our pollinator populations are struggling, but declines of species like whippoorwills help confirm that there's not great things going on. Additionally, the species is interesting because they rely on a diverse set of forest conditions. So whippoorwills are interesting in that they don't just need some mature forest. They need mature forest with an open understory, but they also need some open habitats nearby. Give them some fields because they're going to forage out over those fields at night, but they're going to put their nest, which is essentially just eggs on the ground in the leaf litter, in the forest understory. So whippoorwills need a really dynamic mix of habitats, not just one thing. And we tend to like to think about just single habitat needs for birds, but really most birds need multiple types of habitats within some proximity to each other for different parts of their breeding season. The other thing that's interesting about whippoorwills is we have some indications that they are doing well, in fact, in areas where there are things happening like mineland reclamation or industrial timber. We'll get into that in a minute in a little bit more detail. So if we look at what the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas showed us about eastern whippoorwills, they have pretty high occupancy in the Piedmont, in particular, the southern Piedmont of Virginia, one of the areas I had to work very hard to get volunteers to go. Thank you. If any of you went to the southern Piedmont, you are my hero. It's a hard geography to get surveyed. Same story for southwestern Virginia, the Cumberland area of southwest Virginia, which is also where we tend to have the most whips in the state. So not only did this show us, where the birds are congregating in Virginia during the breeding season, but it also showed us where we've seen the biggest declines. So long-term occupancy, declined in the Ridge and Valley, but really Northern Virginia, urban areas in Eastern Virginia is where we saw a lot of the biggest declines. So BBA products showed us we've still got a lot of whips on the landscape, but we are seeing some pretty big declines over the last 40 years. So what we just decided to do is say, okay, we've got this information. Now, what can the eBird status and trends tell us about what's going on regionally? How does the kind of bigger picture view of what's going on whips add to this story? And as part of a collaboration with some other joint ventures, we actually just got this work published recently. And what we found is really interesting. I looked at the population trends for whippoorwills in Virginia and the entire Appalachian region, and then all the regions all around us. So essentially, it was looking across the whole range of whippoorwills to say, okay, how are they doing here in Virginia? How are they doing in the Appalachian geography? And how are they doing everywhere else? And is it the same? Is it different? And what we found was pretty fascinating. So if you look at this map, the outline in black is the Appalachian, my territory, the Appalachian Mountain geography. And we did not draw that map based on the blue dots. We just drew that based on the ecoregion that is the Appalachian Mountains. So what immediately jumped out at me when I looked at this trend map, and let me give you some orientation because there's different color schemes going on, which I'm sorry, it's what different systems use different color schemes. In this one, in these eBird maps, the blue indicate population increases, while the red indicate population declines. And the size of the circles indicate how many birds you have in a given area. So I'm just going to guess that what jumped out to me is also jumping out to y'all, which is that in Appalachia, in the western edge, western third of Virginia, but especially in Southwest Virginia, and particularly in West Virginia, East Kentucky, honestly, the coal fields, the Central Appalachian coal fields footprint, whips are actually doing okay. They've shown a 10% increase in the last decade, whereas in areas like Virginia's Piedmont, they've experienced anywhere from a 14 to a 74% decline in the last decade. So there are some pretty important and fundamental things going on with these populations. All around the Appalachian region, we are seeing tremendous declines, and they're hanging on pretty well in the mountains. And I'm going to skip over this for the sake of time and talk about what do we think is driving this population change? The concrete answer is we're not sure yet, but we have lots of ideas. We know for sure that pesticides hitting pollinator populations are a major issue for whippoorwills, as I alluded to before. So things like higher pesticide use in the Piedmont, where you've got higher agricultural pressure, same story for anywhere where you have more agriculture and you have a lot more pesticide, herbicide use. We know that is almost certainly a factor for what's hurting whippoorwill populations. We also know habitat loss, obviously, is a big issue for all species. But additionally, we think that, again, this point of there being a very dynamic matrix of forest habitats on a landscape in West Virginia and Kentucky is probably also at play. There are some pretty sweet habitat conditions going on in areas, oddly enough, like areas where mine lands are being reclaimed and managed for things like elk. They're maintaining open landscapes for the elk, but then nearby you've got forest, which is the perfect sweet setup for whippoorwills. Honestly, similar things are happening on big industrial timber ownerships. Industrial timber operations have some areas that are open because they're freshly harvested. They've got other areas that are more mature, growing up. So again, these guys really need a dynamic matrix on the landscape. And what seems to be happening is conditions are pretty rough in the Piedmont, central hardwoods to our west, but what's happening for now in the mountains seems to be favorable. So what are we doing about that? There's still a lot of questions we have to answer about this to try to figure out what's going on, figure out whether whippoorwills are just disappearing from the Piedmont, like they're dying off, or are they moving? Are we seeing them leaving those habitats and moving into the mountains? We don't know. So questions like that are collaborations that we're starting to build with our research colleagues in West Virginia and Virginia. Additionally, I wanted to tease that we are working on standing up a West Virginia coalfields eBird project in the next year or so, because the West Virginia coalfields region, not the actual coalfields, but the region where the West Virginia coalfields are, is one of our worst birded regions in the entire US. That's actually true for East Kentucky and Southwest Virginia too. It gets some of the least birding data, and yet we have all these signs that it is actually super important for a lot of our breeding birds. So we're going to be making a big push to try to entice birders like yourselves to come bird some of these areas in the coal fields. And you better bet I'm probably going to be leading some more rallies to get people into the West Virginia coal fields, but more on that later. And then the other piece I was just going to say is we're also doing a lot of bioacoustics work on private lands throughout West Virginia to try to get at a better understanding of what's going on with these bird populations. So I know it's getting late, so I'm going to wrap up by just a few calls to action, because I often have folks say, well, there's so much going on. How can I help? What can I do? Is there anything I can do? So I thought I'd just give you a few suggestions, right? How can you help the birds of Virginia, not just our migratory birds, but all of the birds? The first one, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it again. Participate in community science. Truly, this is one of the really fundamentally valuable things you can do, because the data you collect, the information you collect, we are actively using it daily now, and we need to keep feeding that engine. We need folks to keep it up, so we keep having updated information every year on what's going on. Plant native plants. You guys have probably heard this before, but it's really important and it's really helpful. All these issues we have with habitat, with food resources and whatnot, if you're planting native plants, if you're limiting your pesticide use, it's really can make a dramatic difference for our bird populations. Doing things like advocating for sustainable forest management, including doing things like fire thinning, invasive species control, all of that stuff, if you have an opportunity to advocate for that in your region, is really important. Treating your windows, that's a big one. Stickers are the easiest way to do this, but that's another one where this kills a lot of migratory birds every year. And I forgot to say, you'll note, I put a little link in the bottom left corner of our screen. abcbirds.org/solutions has some really cool resources on all of these issues. So I just wanted to point you to that. Another one, somebody's going to yell at me, but I'm going to say it. Keep your cats indoors. Put them in their catios. They are the second biggest killer of breeding birds, at least as best we can estimate these days. And then the last one is just supporting bird conservation, whether that's at home and abroad. And this can be helping to support legislation to do things like strengthen or re-strengthen the Migratory Bird Act. There's a lot that folks can do. So I'm going to end there and say thank you for your time. Get out there and bird, y'all, and I'm happy to answer questions if anybody had any. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Ashley. That was amazing. And it's really gratifying to see ways in which the atlas is actually being used for the reasons that we did it.
Yeah, I hope I really hammered that point. We're doing it.
We are. That's great. We did have a few questions or comments. One was the question, early on you had a habitat diversity slide, which had a beautiful forest photo, beds of ferns under trees and evergreens. Do you have any idea where that was taken?
I do, because it's my picture and I took it at White Top Mountain, so near Mount Rogers. If anybody knows, yeah, Rebecca knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, incredible high elevation spruce forest with that moss carpet, and when that thing gets wet, there are just salamanders everywhere. Incredible place.
That's awesome. And a couple of comments about the project you mentioned that was going on in Rockingham, Rockbridge area. I guess Diane mentioned that she was surprised she hadn't really heard about it, and she lives in Rockingham.
Yeah, Laura Neal said it's Rockbridge. So
Rockbridge.
Oh, did I put Rockingham? If I did, that's my bad. Laura, thank you for catching that. Laura Neal is actually directly involved with that project. We recruited her to be one of our local stakeholders involved, helping advise and shape that project. So thanks, Laura, for catching that for me.
and Diane, that would be why you hadn't been hearing about it.
Yeah, that's shameful. Sorry. I know the difference between Rockbridge and Rockingham. I swear.
And Carol commented when you were talking about I think the whippoorwills, that house cats are allowed to roam, are likely contributing to loss of ground nesters. So
yeah, Carol, unfortunately, whippoorwills, particularly in the southeast, further south than us, they certainly hit birds in Virginia, whippoorwills in Virginia. But like where I grew up in central Florida, that's actually the theory on the majority of our loss of whippoorwills and bobwhites. It's habitat loss, but also when I was a kid, we had whippoorwills in the suburbs in Florida, and we don't anymore. And we think a lot of that is cat driven. Yep.
Yeah. So, Tom asked, what impact does a controlled burn have on insect populations and subsequently birds in the area?
Yeah, great question. So the cool thing about, well, the neat thing about burning animals are, so these landscapes are adapted to fire. Like the whole Appalachian region, frankly, the whole East burned periodically. The entire Eastern forest open systems are fire adapted. And that means that particularly species like insects are extremely adapted to rebound to that. So one, especially more aerial insects will just get out of there. If they have the opportunity to, they sense the fire coming. Lots of things move when you do a big burn. Lots of organisms move. But the to not be long-winded, the short answer is insects rebound extremely quickly from that. And so it's not really, if anything, the plant life, the vegetative communities, since they are evolved to fire, those systems actually rebound healthier and more natural conditions. So we actually see boosts, increases in the insect populations post burns. You know, a year, 2, 3 year post burn, you see pretty big upticks in the insects. Great question.
John asks, if cats are number 2 killer of birds, what are 1, 3, 4, and 5?
Ooh, I'm not going to get all. The number one, this habitat loss is the big daddy, right? Habitat loss is just sort of the single big one continuously driving bird population declines. I don't want to get myself in trouble because I'm not sure about the order. Windows are a big one. You know, the top 5 are kind of habitat loss, pesticides. I'm actually not positive if cats are still number 2. Pesticides are very rapidly overtaking some of these. They all kind of compete for which one is killing the most birds every year. What a happy thought. But pesticides, windows, cats, habitat loss, and oh gosh, what would be number 5? Those are the big 4, I'll say.
Great. Tells us what our work should be.
Yeah. Oh, I see Diane asked something about, are you able to coordinate with U.S. Forest Service regarding their burn plans?
Yeah.
So we don't do, like, they have their own whole fire management team. Like, we try to not, like, they have their expertise. If anything, what we do is we do a lot of advocacy in states. So Virginia, I will say, I have to give a lot of credit to the state of Virginia, both the state Department of Forestry and the U.S. Forest Service in Virginia. Virginia burns a lot, which it should. Virginia does. I know it can be frustrating when some of your favorite birding areas get burned. Oh, man, but those systems come back healthier if we do it. And if we do it rotationally, which is what the Forest Service does, what the state does, there are a lot of states surrounding us that have a much harder time getting prescribed burns done. And it really hurts their ability to manage their habitats effectively. Because honestly, burning is a better way to get back, like to create the conditions we want versus some of the other methods. And so, yeah, I have to shout out Virginia that it does a really good job of doing that. And a lot of other states are struggling to do the same.
Okay. Isabel really loves your Kentucky warbler you've got back there with the band.
Oh, my colleague at ABC made that for me. His name's, where is he? Earl. His name's Earl. Really, he's a 5-string player. Of course.
Not related to a Scruggs, perchance?
Exactly. Earl Scruggs style, all the way.
Susan and Tom want to know what's the difference between the VBBA and the USGS Breeding Birds Survey?
Yeah, so the USGS. Yeah, the USGS Breeding Bird Survey is another citizen science mostly effort that's gone on since the 60s. I want to say it's over 50 years old. Very different methodologies. It's a lot more like a point count. So what we had our field technicians doing and what we produced our population estimates and abundance maps from, it's fast. You know, there's driving routes and you do quick surveys at each stop. You're not collecting behavioral information. It's a very different style of data collection, which I think many of you can probably attest because I know a lot of you have done both or do continue to do both. So kind of serving different needs. The cool thing about the BBS is that it is so eBird has only been around for about 10 to 20 years. All those maps and things I was showing you, they only show what's going on over the last decade. The Breeding Bird Survey shows you what's been going on for the last 50 years. Now, the level of modeling they can do, it's a lot broader, right? The BBS models are usually at the state or even the regional level. So it's a little bit coarser, but it's also much more long-term. So they're again, they're all tools in the toolbox. We need them all. We use them all.
Okay. Don wants to know if the VBA results can be used to come up with safe dates.
Oh, good question, Don. So I ended up not talking about phenology because I could give a whole talk about phenology.
That'd be nice.
But phenology meaning timelines. So phenology means timing of everything that is natural world, not just birds. But when we talk about bird phenologies, especially with migratory birds, we're usually talking about when they arrive for the breeding season, how long they're here, when they leave, the timing of birds' natural cycles throughout the year. And so Don's question about safe dates in the breeding bird atlas world are basically when you can feel confident that the birds are no longer migrating, they're here to breed. You don't have to worry about any passage migrants. Don, you might be, we could go down a rabbit hole about that, but a lot of breeding bird atlases, the modern ones, are moving away from safe dates. And the reason they are is because bird timing has gotten so crazy. It's gotten so wonky and unpredictable, again, for a number of reasons, but primarily that's being driven by climate change and how climate change is affecting the timing of plants and insects on the landscape when plants are flowering, when insects are blooming, coming out. All of that is leading to a lot of what we really call climate disruption and kind of phenological disruption. And all of that meaning coming up with reliable, predictable dates is increasingly hard. Megan Massa can probably talk about that too, because I know she's had conversations with some buddies of ours in the Virginia breeding world about trying to come up with like date ranges for birds breeding timelines. And it's gotten a lot harder because it's just a lot messier. It's a lot less consistent. So Don, you could, but there's no easy way to do it. Date is a very complex, messy task these days.
Okay. Ed wants to know, are you distinguishing between species that are declining because of habitat loss versus those that are declining even when small amounts of good habitat remain? For example, are whippoorwills declining in the Piedmont of Virginia because of decreased habitat, or are they declining even in good habitat?
That is a great question. So for whippoorwills specifically, we don't know yet. That's one of the questions. One of the things we need to figure out is, we need to have a better understanding of the mechanisms for decline. So exactly to your point, are they declining even when there's good habitat? Is it primarily where there's not good habitat? I am suspicious that they're probably declining in areas where there's still good habitat. And I think that has more to do with food availability and how food availability is struggling in the Piedmont. That's just a theory. Don't quote me on it. But for other species, not just whippoorwill, so actually golden wing warbler are a good example. We are on the trailing edge of the golden wing warbler range. We have lost most of the southern population of golden wing warblers. So even though there is a lot of good early successional habitat on the landscape, we don't have the golden wings there. But I'm going to caveat that with, we do have a lot of other early successional or young forest species using those habitats that folks are often creating for the sake of golden wings. So not that we shouldn't keep doing that, but there are certainly species for which there are other mechanisms driving their decline. Things like what's going on in the wintering grounds is a big one. So if you've got a lot of issues going on that are not shifting things in the wintering grounds, then the quality of your breeding habitat isn't going to matter. The birds are going to keep declining. So it really is a species by species picture, though, for thinking about that question. But great question.
Okay, and this one's sort of related. Is there any data on the effect of herbicides and pesticides on bird populations in agricultural areas?
Yep, there is a pretty big body of literature and kind of an ever increasing body of literature. There's more on how it affects insects, which isn't too surprising. That's kind of where the research starts. But then there are more and more folks trying to look at how that impacts birds. And there's sort of the direct effects and then the indirect effects. So indirect effects would be, the pesticides are knocking back the food populations, which is hurting the birds and causing bird declines. But there are also increasingly papers coming out showing that there are direct effects of pesticides. So a good example would be things in the neonicotinoid pesticide family. that does not have to bioaccumulate very much at all to kill birds, like to kill a vertebrate like a bird. So maybe I'm being long-winded, but the point being there are data and more research showing both the indirect and the direct effects of pesticides and herbicides. But I would say there's probably more literature right now on the pesticides in particular.
Okay. Going back to the safe dates, Megan Massa says that safe dates and the timelines are a mess. And in many more recent atlases, including the upcoming Vermont, New Hampshire one, we're saying to record what you see, and if the birds show signs of breeding, even if they're not, quote, supposed to, it's incredibly valuable information.
Yeah.
So
yeah, thank you for
more on behavior than the date.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and thank you for that, Megan. We were right on the edge. So there was this sort of paradigm shift in the Atlas world, and we started right before the shift started happening. And then as we were going, we already started a little loosey-goosey when it came to safe dates compared to what the historically, and as we went along, and I started seeing how different, even more different the date timelines were, we said, all right, we're going to just stop being as strict about this because we want the information.
Then just a couple of other just comments. Jeff reminds us that Sergio Harding coordinates getting folks to run the breeding bird survey routes in Virginia. So if somebody wants to do it, we can put you in touch with Sergio.
And he is forever looking for volunteers for that. So he always needs more help.
And Joanne Dowley says, hey, I took that photo of you and Guy in June 2019.
Thank you. I could not, Joanne, I had that in my volunteers pictures file and I had not made a note of who took it. So now I can make a note of that and credit you. So thank you for telling me.
That's all the comments. I don't know if anybody in the audience has another question or whether we're ready to wrap this up. So.
Well, awesome questions. Thank you all.
Yeah. Carol says, thanks very much. Great information.
Yeah, let's give Ashley a big round of applause. As always, just astounding information, and we so appreciate the work you do. You're like the Energizer Bunny, so keep on.
I try. Harder with a kid, but I'm still keeping at it. Thank you all for inviting me to speak. I hope it was interesting and informative, and I always enjoy getting to connect with this community. And like I said, stay tuned. We're trying to get some more targeted kind of citizen science eBird based projects off the ground in the next couple years in both, maybe starting in West Virginia, but with the goal of spreading into Virginia and East Kentucky. So I'm going to be coming back at you all soon with that kind of stuff. So
great.
So in wrapping up, again, can't say how much I appreciate everybody. We're a great group, and we're going to get a lot of things done. We have already. I know we've mentioned this in newsletters and so forth, but we had that tremendous push of fundraising to get the Atlas published. We raised $300,000 to get that website up. This is the VSO. Now, DWR did tremendous amount of input too. The data collection, the analysis, so many agencies put money into it, but that $300,000 was a big deal. And initially I remember sitting on the board and folks going, oh, yeah, this is ridiculous. We're not going to be able to do this. And Summer was like, we're going to get it done. And credit to Sergio too, for laying out all the timelines and the breaking down how the expenses could potentially look. So now that that's done, our big push is conservation. And that's what we're going to put our biggest fundraising efforts to. We could use some help if anybody has is in your wheelhouse to serve on the conservation committee. We can use some help there. That'll be recommending projects and grants and all of that. And so this is our huge push, and from here forward, that's going to be one of our biggest pushes. So I just wanted to add that as we wrap up here. But do let me know, or anybody that's on the board, if you're interested in volunteering for that or helping in any way at all. I mean, we're a great group to work with. I've had just a blast. I've learned so much, and it's been wonderful. So in closing, much appreciation. You've all been great. Ashley, thanks so much again. Congratulations to our award winners. Thanks to our board. Thanks again to Nick Newberry, who's rolling off. And Dixie, if you're ready to set us all loose.
Yeah.
I thought, let's wait, do I need a motion to, or can we just end this meeting?
I don't think you need a motion to adjourn. I think that's Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, let's have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Just say aye. We're not going to beat everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Okay.